Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review The Big O, Season 1, Episodes 1 through 4, because eventually there is also The Big O 2, and just kind of it bleeds all through there. So, while going on and kind of rewatching the show, because this very show was to be very impressionable on me, and so early on in my anime watching, I think the only title that was to be before this was probably Cowboy Bebop. And then after this was to be stuff like Akame ga Kill, or maybe High School of the Dead may have also been fairly early in my anime watching. Kind of a little bit of barrage of just kind of certain things of which that I have certain things about these shows that eventually had me go on and further discover this thing called anime and really be like, man, like these things all had to really just all work out for me to continue to want to watch anime and find stuff more interesting about it and then find like either a superhero genre or a thing that is to go on and have me want to compare it to so many projects that I can enjoy it just because of me trying to figure out some similarities in anime than I can with live action stuff. So, going on into the Big O, my original pitch that I had been given with this show, very simplistic, but either way, it was effective. Someone was to go on and tell me, like, well, hey, if you like Batman and if you like Power Rangers, you'll probably like the Big O, which is kind of a strange two lumping of things. But then after watching the show, I can get what they said. Where, like, I could look at Batman, specifically the Arkham games, and could probably understand why comparison to that. But then also, I can look at Power Rangers because of the Megazord slash, in this case, mech that the character goes into and faces off against neither equal mech or monster. Either way, these things are to be seemingly called the Megaduce, and they are to be things that are to be culminating to the end of every episode. Because every episode is to really just be a mystery that bleeds into a bigger crisis, that bleeds into a bigger event. And that is to go on and be such an interesting thing. As the dialogue is to be a thing that is to probably be the most forgotten by me, but every once in a while there's like little pieces here and there where it's like, okay, this dialogue is only important because our character going on and getting this little nugget of something that is going to lead him into this certain direction, and that's all you really need to know, because everything else is just words that are to just fill time. We go into the very first pilot episode as basically a two-parter that focuses on a character known as Dorothy in the show that eventually will become Roger's sidekick. Within these first two episodes, we come to find that Roger is to be this private investigator negotiator that is to be in the midst of a hostage negotiation. Roger goes on to hand over the briefcase full of money to get what he believes is a human person, but is to realize after the fact that it's actually an android. Roger then goes on to realize that he's made a big mistake, and everybody has to point that out to him about how he made this big mistake. So, Roger has to figure out a way of somehow rectifying this, that he feels if he goes on and makes more of this investigation to figure out why Dorothy is to not be as important as what eventually will be Dorothy 1, which will be the other sister, which will be this mech that eventually Roger has to face off against within the Big O, and figure out anything of the Soldano factory, um, warehouse, making of these illegal items and these memory fragments. And all of this is to go on and eventually help us better understand who really Dorothy is and why she should go on and be worthy of Roger's sidekick like title. We then push on after that to then just have Roger go on to these almost kind of road trips. We bring in this character who is to be Angel, who's another kind of female character that kind of shows up under different names, but if anything, we have to be reminded that she is to be this character named Angel. And so Roger goes on and meets with Angel to eventually discover this electric city that ironically is to not really uphold its own name, because the city is to try as much as possible to be in more of like the dark ages, that they don't use electricity. And Roger is left trying to figure out the mystery of why. So Roger goes into the city to come to find that there's to be an old man that is to basically knock him out and tie him up, kind of creating a very awkward situation between the two. But then Roger goes on to further realize that Roger and this old man need to work together to beat this eel monster, which is to appear within this water, and eventually have it be figured out that the eel is to be draining the city of power or to be attracted by it, hence why Roger is to, of course, go on and realize that this city does not use power to avoid being either attacked or to be avoiding of this eel monster. So then we push on into the fourth episode. The fourth episode is to kind of give us quasi somewhat of an origin of the Big O in a way, because we come across the Big O's prototype, or in this case, an archetype, and we have a reporter character who eventually used to be called the Black Forest, and I don't think I'll go anything beyond that actual name, even though he does actually have a longer, stretched out name that is to just be like, whatever. Like, I'm just going to say Black Forest because it's freaking easier. Black Forest is to be this reporter that wants to know the truth, that wants to know the past. And eventually, this forces us to go through the subway station into this underground city, where eventually it has this mech, but then also has this reporter who wants to discover the truth about the past, about where they came from. And eventually that has, in a way, a Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla kind of approach of an episode, where we have the Big O facing off against the archetype in this big battle, and trying to see if the original model is better than the new model. And of course, we'd come to find that the newer model, there has to be some kind of advantages to it. But every single one of these episodes are to actually be decently entertaining. Like, I won't go on and be wowed by them right now because all of them are technically a rewatch for me. The dialogue is very long-winded. It doesn't really exactly need to be there, but like, we get to a point where, like, here's kind of like certain pieces of the dialogue. We have at one point where Roger kind of makes his way into his car quite often to give this whole monologue, and there is to be like a chestnut of dialogue where he goes on to mention about how the city Amnesia eventually had all lost their memories at some point, and eventually the most impactful or impacted person was to be the elderly. But also there's sometimes in dialogue where a character is dying and all you really get from the whole conversation is really just the words nightingale. And it's like, what the heck does that mean? Oh, nightingale means that there is some club that exists, and as people keep further talking about nightingale, and Roger is like, yeah, I guess there is something about this nightingale thing because everybody just keeps talking about it, the story of it, the the thing behind it. So I guess I have to go on and discover this nightclub that has the word nightingale in it. But anyways, so a lot of the dialogue is to just be like rushing to get to the more important chunks of it, because everything else is just like having us probably discover between like Major Dan and Roger that they're good friends and that they have a history together. But what else are we going to really get from this? So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just push on and say, like, every one of these episodes are to actually be good quality still to this day after rewatching it. I'm sure if this is your very first ever time watching this show, you might have a much more impactful thought process about the show. Some people may absolutely love this show, and some people may find it boring. I don't know. You would have to go on and investigate that upon yourself. You have to get your private eye way of about watching the show. And for those of you that are going on like, well, how can I see this show? There's no way to. Like, help me. Well, I'll go on and I'll give you apps to be able to do so. There is an app called, and I'm going to spell this out for you, so kind of get your pen and paper or whatever you are to have it equivalent out. So, this first app is to be ANIXTA. This would be the app that I would first recommend. Hopefully you can find it on a Google Play Store if you have a mobile device. I would recommend a tablet or iPad, but if you just have a phone, then on your own, hopefully you can find this app and be able to download it and be able to say that you can watch The Big O for absolutely free. There is also another app called Anime, and here's another word that I have to spell out, KAI. So again, that's Anime, and then the second word is KAI. Those are the two apps that I had found The Big O. There is quite a bit of other anime apps that I do have, so if for whatever reason you could not find these, I'm sure I could probably recommend something else. But if anything, those seems to be the two things that I was to go on and find The Big O on. The first app I think is a lot easier to go on and watch this show on compared to the other, but regardless, whatever app you can find is whatever app you can find. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just push on into full-on spoilers about every one of these episodes, which is the full-on breakdown, which is to ultimately be a thing that not exactly is to be a thing that everybody is to check out because they probably are to either know the details or to go on and not be as interested in them. Every once in a while, there'll be a little like nugget of thing that I go on and I kind of break down about the episode, but most of the time it's just going over scene for scene, blow for blow, and that can go on and not be as interesting as maybe any early parts of whatever this review was. So, letting you know now, like, this is to be the crossroad or the empath of which that you can go on and check out the show. So, I'd greatly appreciate anybody taking the time to watch any of these, because this goes on and has a number of people just go on and be able to find the show and be able to check it out for once. So, with that said, I'm going to go on and get into, of course, spoiler time. Spoiler time is about that time again to spoil these episodes. Let me know in the comments below what is your favorite mech, giant-sized monster movie or show. Maybe it'll be Power Rangers. Maybe it'll be any number of things of which that I tag on here. When I look at the Big O, like, yeah, Batman and Power Rangers is probably the quickest comparison. I could probably even throw stuff in like Subnautica or I could throw in like Cowboy Bebop, where it just kind of seems like the characters are similar, the visuals are kind of similar. I could throw in stuff like Jason Statham's Transporter. I could even go on and I could throw like Godzilla's and Ultramans and all these kind of just maybe even like Voltrons or something that are to be just kind of like a number of people or a person going into a mech, like Pacific Rims and stuff like that. But so, with that said, let me know in the comments below what is be your favorite anime, because maybe at the end of the day, I may go on and cover it here upon this channel. But either way, it'll go on and be a thing of which that helps me realize that people actually exist out there. There's people that go on and actually do put comments down. Or even if you go on and put gibberish, it does actually help out the channel because it's a comment that can go on and help the video go a little bit further than it was before. So, with that said, now I'm going to go on and get to the point of the review where I talk about some future reviews, some stuff that I'm kind of planning, or if is to be things that are kind of rationing out in my mind. So it does kind of suck because there is some stuff that actually is going on and actually doing well, really well on the channel. And I'm taking a long-winded amount of time to get back to that because I feel that it's like, man, this thing was like a huge success. Like I should probably go on and revisit it at some point. But I have so many things also on this list of stuff that I've already planned that has already been posted upon the community tab to eventually get to. And maybe all of those things will also have some kind of impact on the channel because at least I can go on and continue this momentum, continue this way about doing all this stuff, and it'll all just do well, shockingly, because of how much of a dry spell I've had for so long. But it seems that now I'm going in the right direction. I'm going in with actually much more smarter bits of content to try to put out. My temptation, regardless of how really well it did come off, uh, my temptation is to still want to try and cover maybe some Resident Evil films just to do something more in live action. I had other like live action movie titles and what have you. I had even shows to kind of bring into the fold also. But then when also Resident Evil was to be a thing that I was like, well, I can't ignore. Yeah, like so I am kind of tempted to cover more of that. I am also looking at some titles that may go on and bring in some supernatural interest to me specifically. There's shows like Wolf Like Me that I just got on to find out about that could be something interesting. The Terror is a show that I had found, but also I'm realizing that maybe that show is to be kind of so rare that I'm kind of questioning that impact. There is also to be like stuff like the MTV Teen Wolf thing that eventually I'm going to be tempted to go back into, as well as also other shows that did have a large amount of impact on the channel, and it's too hard to not ignore that I should probably go back to those. Like, there's stuff like Yellowstone, there's stuff like Alice in Borderland, there's stuff like Hellbound that seem to do have more seasons, seem to do have things that do well on the channel. Then I'm kind of just tempted to like, well, should I go back into all these? Should I go on and should I put together another kind of piece of sheet to just kind of graph all these to know where I'm going next after all of these things are to be kind of done and over with the first list that I have to try to get to. Yeah, like so many questions and so much content is to just kind of to be thrusted to my attention, and hopefully I will go on and figure something out in the future, and hopefully I can get these projects out in a timely manner, because it seems that when I really do try to go on and cover it on that exact day, yeah, I either get like to the point where it's like it's so late in the day that I get so tired, or I get this or I get that going on. So, and I also try to do everything else within my normal day to day of life. And yeah, so just things just fall through the cracks. So, but I'm trying as best I can to just consistently keep doing projects as best as I can. So, with that said, let's push on into the episodes, the blow by blow. So, yeah. So, spoilers, everybody. Spoilers. So, the beginning of this has a quote that starts every episode with "Cast in the name of God, ye not guilty." That seems to be duplicated again within the starting of every mech battle, where we would go on to have uh, Roger look down onto his kind of instruments of his mech when he's in the Big O, and that kind of line of dialogue just kind of starts every single time. It seems that Roger is to be quite a bit of religious character, is at some points he used to talk about the wrath of God, or he used to go on and actually pray when somebody dies. So if that's not your bag, then oh well, like that's not a huge part of the show. But if anything, there's bits and pieces of that in there inserted at some points. So now we get to the beginning of this piece, and we have Roger that's just driving in his car. There could be like actual technical words for every single piece of armory and every single piece of something here, but I'm going to go on and just be very simplified in everything. And if I don't know the technical things of things, then someone could correct me. But logically, I'm just going to go on and just like beyond the Big O, or beyond me saying the Mega Deuce, like everything else is going to go on and just be like severely simplified. Like we do have also the monsters, we have certain characters that have their own separate names. But yeah, I'm going to try to leave it uh as like, well, hey, like I'm going into this all seemingly of new, and from a big gap of the last time I checked this out. Plus, also, when the Big O through the subway station has this like transport like vehicle, like if that thing actually does have a name, that is to go on and simply escape me. Um, because I never went to do that due diligence of figuring out that bit of chestnut of whatever a transport vehicle's name is, because I didn't think about it. So, we start out this episode with Roger driving in this car, introducing himself, explaining that he is to be in the city of amnesia, of all things, because everyone is to have lost their memory within the city. So, Act 1 is to be called Roger the Negotiator, explaining that within this episode we're going to giving you this character and help that or hopes that you understand him. But really, if anything, I think more Dorothy is more of the character that you really need to know. Like Roger, it's like once you find out that he is a private investigator, like and that he makes mistakes because he's not perfect, then that's all you really need to know. Like after that, it's like, okay, let's focus on this Dorothy character more. So Roger makes his way to this hangar bay to pull out this briefcase from out of his car to meet up with a character known as Beck with his goons. So as they go on and they get the introductions out of the way between the two of them, as Beck has this yellow hair and yellow suit, which is be quite interesting. Like the just like, man, I guess he has to have a suit that matches his hair. So strange to me. But anyways, I can almost say that every one of these episodes also can feel like the real Ghostbusters in a way, as far as the way of storytelling. Especially when we go on and we get Angel that later goes on and meets up with Roger and gets him into what the case is. Yeah, every episode can also go on and feel like the real Ghostbusters, so I guess that could be some comparisons there, or maybe even like Scooby Doo's and stuff like that. When eventually there is this mystery to be solved. But anyways, so after Beck and Roger get to their intros, and it's like, okay, we both know why we're here. Beck's men gets Dorothy out of the car, and Roger is to open up the case to show the cash. Beck goes on have binoculars handy and check the money to look if it's real. So Roger then closes the briefcase, slides it to the point where there seems to be some dust or some smoke that seems to be coming from out of it because of how impactful the push really was. And so Dorothy, with Goon behind her, starts to make her way blindfolded to Roger. And it is quite odd for, honestly, Dorothy to be blindfolded. Because if you think about it, Roger is going on and seeing Beck's face and the face of the goons. What exactly does Dorothy need to be blindfolded for? But then also, like, yeah, like, I'm just a little confused about the whole blindfold thing. If anything, yeah, they could have removed her blindfold as soon as, like, they could have, like, released her and have her walked. But, I don't know, I guess that's just me. I guess that's just a whole effect thing. So, as Dorothy makes her way to Roger, and Dorothy is following Roger's voice, we have the goon from behind her that grabs the briefcase and walks off. Roger tells Dorothy to unblindfold herself, and so Roger looks directly at Dorothy. He's like, huh, alright. So, all of a sudden, off in the distance, Roger is to hear the squealing of a car. Roger is to turn and realize, yeah, I guess sometimes my clients would be impatient about results. So, Roger off in the distance is to see none other than Soldano's car. I'm having problems figuring out the exact pronunciation of this character, so if I'm saying it wrong, my issue, but if anything, this character won't be alive for very long, so it won't really matter if I say it wrong either way. So, Dorothy is supposed to be Soldano's daughter, it seems, is what we really thought. But then we'll also come to find that that is not exactly true, because Soldano is to have created Dorothy, because Soldano will run to Roger and explain that this is not really his daughter, that this person in front of him is to be an android, and Soldano complains to Roger, how is it that you didn't know that this was an android? And Roger's like, oh, well, like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I just couldn't have noticed until finally Dorothy was to kind of adjust her head and make this ka-chung, ka-chung kind of sound. So, we see that Beck's car is thrusting through the hangar, crashing through this wall, and Roger is to go on and be like, well, if we aren't getting a fair shake here, then there is always an answer for that. Roger then goes on and whips out from his blazer this remote and hits this button. All of a sudden, from Beck's car goes seemingly an explosion, and that explosion is to be the briefcase coming from the car, and the briefcase is now flying in the air, being kind of propelled or kind of rocketed off into the air. And so Beck's men go thrusting out of the car, coughing on all the smoke. And then they whip out their guns to blast the briefcase, and Beck is like, well, hey, don't probably shoot the briefcase. There's money in there. And the briefcase comes flying open, and all the cash comes thrusting out of it. Beck, very upset, and so Roger is to say that all of this is to have been on good faith, but if anything, on one side there is to be a lack thereof. So now we have to cut to Roger needing to do more investigation on Beck's people, but then also more investigation on Soldano, the guy that he has kind of partnered up with, to find out more about this whole android thing and why it is to have existed. So Roger then goes on to make his way to this kind of speakeasy, or this kind of bar-like location. So Roger drives with his car to this place, and then place an armor shielding around his car so that way no one tries to steal it. Because this is like Batman Returns, where at some point Batman goes on and calls out for a shielding of his car, and then there seems to be a whole bit of armor plating that goes all over it, so no one tries to steal the Batmobile of all things, which is kind of just strange. But Batman will come to find that within the movie that there's to be a device put in place upon his car to kind of have Penguin control it. So either way, like somebody takes advantage of this vehicle of Batmobile. So, but of course, back to this show. So Roger makes his way into the speakeasy or the bar, gets this bottle, and makes his way to Big Ear, this guy that it seems is giving him or feeding him information. So Big Ear is to talk about the case that Roger was involved in, and like, yeah, like it looks like you failed big time. So Big Ear goes on to kind of make fun of Roger, and Roger's like, well, hey, like all I needed to know was who was to have had this daughter. And when after going on and doing that, that could continue on my investigation to figure out where I need to have gone on and actually gone further within this of getting to the person I need to have gotten to. I'm very hugely paraphrasing here because I really want to cut through a lot of this dialogue. So Big Ear is to go on and eventually mention about how Soldano's company is to be dealing with memory fragments and also help Roger understand why it is that Roger could find an android that passes so much as human. And Soldano's factory is to be producing illegal items. So hence android, hence robot. So Big Ear is basically telling Roger here that Soldano is a person, or Soldano is to be a person to be investigating, not Beck. Because eventually when more investigating in Soldano, he'll come to find uh, the real answers of where this Dorothy character really is and what was to all really happen here, which is that Soldano all along was to know that this woman of Dorothy was to be this robot, and there never was a real human Dorothy. That if anything, there was another daughter that was to be Dorothy 1, that was to be a mech, that it seems that also Roger had to retrieve. So, Roger throws some cash at the Big Air. The Big Air takes his drink and is to kind of cheers to Roger as he leaves. So, we now push on into Roger getting back into his car and driving around. Here is where Roger goes on and talks about amnesia and about how everyone had lost their memory at some point, and the only ones really affected by this was the elderly. I've probably gone on and already stated this, but I'm restating it here because this is just the line of dialogue. So, Roger makes his way back to his mansion to make his way back to Norman, and Roger is to talk about the brakes of his car and that they need adjusting. And then Norman is to state to Roger how there is a woman named Wainwright that is here to see him. Roger also complains about how criminals are not seemingly behaving professionally anymore, which is very baffling and confusing. But ultimately, Norman is to kind of like, well, yeah, you are saying something right, sir. The criminals should be behaving a lot more professionally. So, that it's a forgotten art form now, of way of going about things. So, Roger makes his way into this elevator up the stairs to eventually meet with Wainwright, and he'll come to find that Wainwright is very familiar to him because it's none other than Dorothy. Roger is to go on and be like, hey, wait a minute. You're Dorothy. Why are you saying that your name is now Wainwright? Shouldn't your name be Soldano? And Dorothy is like, no, like, my name is Wainwright. My father is Wainwright. So, Roger is like, oh, okay. So, as Dorothy and Roger both speak here, Dorothy goes on to ask Roger for him to work for her, going on and saying how she needs protection. And Roger's like, a robot needing protection? This seems a little bit weird. So, eventually Dorothy's to say yes, like, for an android needing a PI, that is also fairly weird, but if anything, you're just the guy for the job. So, now Norman comes in and is to explain to Roger how he had completely forgotten that also Major Dan is to been waiting for him. So, Roger goes on and makes his way to Major Dan, the police officer, that will come to find that both Roger and Dan are to have such a long relationship with. So, Dan is going on and looking at all the pictures, trying to figure out if there's anything he can remember from them. So, Dan points out all of these pictures to Roger and says, hey, are you just keeping these pictures around hoping that you'll remember anything? And Roger and Dan are to talk about that kidnapping of that daughter. Dan is to mention how Soldano never really did actually have a daughter. And that is the kind of to be the big takeaway that, yeah, Soldano never had a human daughter, but if anything, he created one. He created a robot daughter. And that's why that Dorothy is to actually be a Wainwright, but either way, she's to be a robot regardless. She still is not human via any name. And Soldano had gone on to create Dorothy, so he's technically her father in that capacity. But Dorothy really does belong to Timothy Wainwright, who is to have funded the whole creation of her. So, and we'll find out Timothy, and we'll find that he too will be a character that eventually will be killed. Somewhat soon, as also Soldano will face that same kind of fate. So, while both Roger and Dan continue to talk here, Dan will go on and mistakenly say the words Lieutenant Smith, and Roger will correct him here to say, hey, I'm not to go on and be one of your grunts anymore. I'm not working for you anymore. So if anything, we can drop the whole like Lieutenant Smith thing. Like, that's not my name anymore. Don't call me by that ever again. So Dan has to apologize and be like, well, hey, old habits, I'm sorry. Like, really just saying that these two characters are very much old friends and that they've had a history together. And all of this will be revealing from these photos that, yeah, they have been friends in the past. And we'll come to find in these episodes that Roger was to go on and work alongside Dan, but then gave up being a police officer to then go into his own private investigation and kind of do his own thing. Because this guy is seemingly rich anyways. Like, what does he really need to go on and be a part of this somewhat like police force of which that like he doesn't really need to do that because of just look at his house, look at the lifestyle he has. Like, what does he really need to do that kind of job for? Like, it seems that he has everything that he is to want. Plus, also he continues to get these private investigator jobs that are to seemingly keep him busy. So after Dan goes on and brings up how Roger was to blow the whole hostage thing and then walks off, we have Roger that gets into his car and Dorothy follows. Roger is to try to go on and make his way to the Soldano's factory, and Dorothy, when realizing that, is like, well, hey, I'm going to go with you. Because technically, she wants to go on and get answers as well as Roger does. So, as the two of them make their way to the factory, Roger then is to go on and figure out that Soldano is to be technically a parent to Dorothy, and a parent because it's technically her creator. And it's so interesting as we have to drive this car, how there always seems to be like some kind of potholes or some kind of something where the car has to make this kind of clunk clunk kind of sound. I don't know why they always have to do that for some estranged reason. Like, why does that have to be an important thing on the show? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, is it just something to fill the time of the show? Or, like, is it just something of a little thing that this show is to find funny that it just does every time. So it continues to do that. Having people probably want to figure out why exactly the show just keeps doing stuff like that, and it bugs the shit out of them for why they keep doing those kinds of things. I just don't understand. Um, Maybe it is to go on and maybe help figure out what environment the character's going into. I don't know. If anything, it would have to be something that you would have to go on and question the people who had created the show to be like, why did you do this stuff with the car and it getting to a point where it's going through these roads and just keeps clunking all the time? What is that? What is the point of that? There is no point in my mind. But anyways, so as well as also there's so much like no point to the dial. There's like, God, like why are they doing all this stuff? Like I question it all, and it's fun to just watch this to try to decipher everything. But anyways, pushing on here. So Roger makes his way to the factory to find a big gaping hole within the factory. Roger gets ever so close to the hole and almost slips in a little. So there to go on and seemingly like if there's not this big huge long-winded amount of dialogue that kind of goes nowhere, but little bits and pieces of takeaway, there is also to be quite a bit of times where everybody's like, what is that? What is happening? What like everybody is to basically be like Mark Wahlberg from The Happening. What's going on? What is it? Who did like there's a lot of that going on where everybody is trying to discover and figure out like and put the pieces of the puzzle together. So as Roger is to start to look around, they would come to find that there at one point was a mech that was housed within this factory, but it seems to all be but gone. The further as Roger looks around, he sees that there is a window that is to be shattered and blood coming from it. So Roger walks upon this broken glass with Dorothy behind him to make his way into this elevator that goes to the place of the broken glass with blood in it. And we would then come to find lying on the ground would be Soldano dying. Soldano goes on to speak with Dorothy one last time, calling her his nightingale, and that's to be the only real true takeaway from all of this. And then shortly thereafter, Soldano goes on and dies. All of a sudden, there is to be Beck's men with a rocket launcher or bazooka that is to be directed within the area of which that both Roger and Dorothy and Soldano's body are to be placed within. And while Roger is going on and praying and taking a moment of silence, and Dorothy is to question why Roger is to even do so. Hey, why are you praying? And Roger is like, well, it's just the respectful thing to do. So Roger all of a sudden notices that his car is giving him a notification upon his watch that goes on to say that he is being locked on right now. So Roger grabs Dorothy and forces the two of them to run so that way they can protect themselves to make their way onto this little balcony for them to get out of this area. Both of them fall onto the ground as the area behind them is now lit up aflame. Roger then turns to Dorothy and says, hey, since you're the android, it would be much better off if you would run to direct their fire, as Roger is to take the time to figure out how to go on and how to come up with some defensive measures against these guys, because he himself does not have a rocket in his pocket, so to speak. So as Dorothy is starting to run through this balcony, or this bridge, Roger is to go on and look at his watch, and on the watch, he is to make an arms selection of missiles coming from his car. So all of a sudden, Roger's car is to make an adjustment where there seems to be some rocket launchers that come from out of it on both sides of each part of the car. And as Beck's men get ready for another rocket launcher thrust coming out of it, we then would have Dorothy that is to seemingly almost fall from this balcony or from this bridge, but she barely holds on to this piece. As that is going on, we have Roger that is to guide his missile to attack this car and takes it out. Roger and Dorothy make their way out of the factory, and Dorothy ends up calling Roger a louse, which is such an interesting put down that I've never heard before. And so I'm like, man, I hope that'll be something that I'll retain in the future, because I'm like, what the heck is a louse? I've never heard of that before. So maybe that seems to be a common insult somewhere, but I've never heard of it before. I would like to hope that this insult was probably invented for this anime show, because then that would be funny. If it's something that has never been said before, that would just be funny. So Roger is to say that normally human women insult him in that manner, but if anything, Roger gets back into his car to find Norman calling him. So Norman is to inform Roger that there's a kind of a bulletin going out where there's this giant robot wreaking havoc upon the town. And so Roger is to make the discovery that this giant robot must be Dorothy 1, the original big sister of Dorothy. And that was the thing that had gone missing within that factory, is to be a thing that Roger needs to go up against. So now we cut to Dorothy 1. As Roger is driving his way to get to where Dorothy 1 is. So eventually we have Roger that is to be stopped by one of the police officers. And the rookie character that has never seen Roger before calls him a hotshot. And Roger is like, oh, you must be new here. You don't know who I am, but if anything, in the future, you should remember my face, because you're going to be seeing it a lot. So Roger goes on and drives off with the rookie chasing after the car, trying to stop him. And while that's going on, Dorothy is to be passing by a familiar face, and she says the word "my father." And there is not quite an understanding of what that really means. Dorothy is to go on and see Timothy Wainwright just on the street somewhere, and eventually we'll find out in other episodes that we'll see more of this character, and again, eventually he will go on and meet his timely demise. So now we get to Dorothy 1. Dorothy 1 is to have a swarming of army and police all around it. Dorothy 1 has these lobster-like hands that are to have these tentacles go flying out of it. And these tentacles are to be bursting its way from what at first looked like a police station, but I think it's actually a bank. Because the way in which that this tentacles go thrusting through this building, like there's so many police officers that I'm like, is this a police station? But then I seem to find out that it's a bank. Like it must be one of those very like high-end banks that are to be kind of like a a Fort Knox or something that is a big lavish bank that has so much security and has so much like it's a big massive building. So this tentacle thrusts through this building, making its way through this elevator, and down it goes to eventually make its way to this vault. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So as Roger and Dorothy thrust from out of their car, we have Roger that calls upon the Big O and saying it's showtime. Roger's watch is the glow of blue, which that is to give us a clue that the Big O is going to arrive here because of his watch turning to a bluish color. So now we cut to Dan, and Dan is trying to figure out what the mech is after, stating that it's not seemingly after the money, it's after the printing plates to, I guess, to be able to make the money. So that it seems is to be what the thing is after. Then all of a sudden, the sewer lids are to go flying, and there seems to be a bit of rumbling going down on the streets. Dan is to cry out, "Not again!" as we come to find all of a sudden within the ground, as the ground starts to shake and then give way, we would find the Megaduce, or we would find the Big O, come crashing from the ground to arrive in utter style to go up against this threat. So we now have to have Roger figure out its way to get into the Big O. And so Roger runs his way to the Big O's hand, and then the hand gets to a position to where Roger can get into the Big O, so that way he can go on and get inside this huge mech to go into battle positions. So as Roger starts the Megaduce, we have this bit of dialogue of which that I had stated in the early parts of this to be kind of restated here. Cast in the name of God, he not guilty. So Roger cries out for the Big O and to get it into action. So Roger goes on and is to get the Big O and have it come from behind the tentacled Dorothy 1, which is to go on and have the tentacles start to get retracted as the tentacles, it seems, were going on and grabbing money or grabbing whatever these things were that they were trying to get to, but stopped just in the nick of time. So the Big O thrusts Dorothy 1 into one of these buildings, and we have Dorothy 1 that starts to punch the Big O, and the Big O starts to brace, starts to protect itself, gets its hands up to just kind of block. Dan is going on and telling everybody he's like directing traffic. He's trying to get everybody out of there to evacuate. So that way, as further and further rubble starts to happen within this town, people could be safe. He's kind of directing traffic here. So, at a point of Dan doing that, as the further and further this battle occurs, we would eventually go on and have Dorothy, who gets further and further closer to the battle, without her having any, like, wherewithal of, like, well, hey, there's a battle going on, I should probably just kind of keep my distance. No. Dorothy gets ever so much closer to the battle, and eventually Dan will try and save her from her own self. So, back into the battle here. So, eventually, the Big O will get back into the offensive. Eventually, it'll use what I would call like its pistons coming from its arm. Like it's kind of like its elbow in some ways. But there's this kind of like cylinder like thing that comes firing out from off of its arm that I would just say it's a piston because that's the only thing that makes logical sense to me. So people can correct me if there's any technical term of any of these things of what this move really is. But if anyways, so the Big O continues to attack Dorothy 1 and continues to punch, and the tentacles start to come out and start to wrap around the Big O. Getting to the point where Dorothy 1 is now kind of thrusting the Big O kind of all over the place with these tentacles. And as the Big O breaks free, he punches into Dorothy 1 and then gets into his big kind of hand swing where he has this kind of like one-liner. So, which was so like interesting to see this big attack, this kind of big, because what we see here is Roger has these joysticks in front of him, and he has this kind of like way of which that is to have this like rail going for these joysticks that he has to kind of go on and toggle through. So Roger goes on and takes this joystick and kind of rears back and then goes in and pushes the joystick back into doing this big massive punch, which just visually looks so interesting, as well as also being a thing where it's like, okay, so this is going to be a big massive attack that is going to be like this kind of finishing blow, it seems. And when that doesn't work, there seems to be an avenue of which to kind of do other things. So, but the punch is very impactful. And as Dorothy 1 ends up going down, we would then have Dan that notices Dorothy and is running to save her from the chaos of this mech probably falling on her. So Dan grabs Dorothy but realizes that she is way too heavy, and the two of them fall. Dan is trying to brace the impact of this mech, hoping that he can save not only himself, but then also Dorothy, not knowing that she is an android, but just seeing how heavy she is. So the two of them fall onto the ground, and we are to have an assumption that more than likely both Dan and Dorothy have been simultaneously been crushed or killed because of this mech falling on them. To the point to where Roger is like, no, nah, rah, rah. So that's what kind of fades us out into the following next episode called Dorothy, Dorothy. So there is a bit of recap of the very first episode. I won't get into all of that because basically I'd already talked about everything of the last episode. So now we cut to showcasing here Act 2, Dorothy, Dorothy, and Dan and Dorothy are to seemingly be okay. Dan goes on and gets up from the ground to realize that Dorothy has all of a sudden disappeared, which is kind of strange. Because Dan goes on, and the first thing we see of him has Dorothy from underneath him, but then when Dan gets up, he all of a sudden realizes that Dorothy is absent, that she's gone, which makes no sense. If you pause it just right, you can see that Dorothy's body is underneath him, so it's like, okay, how is it that all of a sudden she just disappeared so quickly? It makes no sense. So, the Big O goes on to seemingly retract this chain and then starts to walk off. Dan, upset with the Big O for all the carnage that it has caused, Dan is to hope that his police force or his military force or whoever is to have the weaponry good enough to stop the Big O, because of all the carnage that it is caused. Like, he wants both the Big O and Dorothy 1 to, like, okay, like, let's realize that there is going to be no good guy here, technically, and that the Big O needs to be as equally brought in for its crimes also. Its crimes against the destruction of this city. So, as Roger with the Big O starts to walk off here, he is to kind of be insulted by this force trying to stop him from leaving. Roger is to be like, oh, well, hey, like, I saved you people and this is the thanks I get? Well, that's nice. So, Norman ends up calling Roger and saying, like, should I be expecting you, sir? And Roger is to go on and prep his vehicle to go into the underground, and then Roger kind of appears at some point behind Dan and kind of mocks Dan as Dan is not to go on and follow up where the Big O had gone to. So, because Dan is to make his way to the hole of the Big O, and Roger is to say to Dan, it's like, oh, like, are you not going to go on and are you not going to follow this thing underground? Like, are you afraid of the dark? And Dan is like, well, hey, like, don't poke fun at me. So we would go on to find the Big O goes underground and then makes its way onto a transport vehicle that is to be on a subway or railroad-like system that eventually makes its way back to Roger's mansion to eventually get set up into a standing up position to eventually get locked into an area which is to have it be housed. So I think at some point later we come to find that, like, the Big O, at some point there's like an adjustment of where it just kind of comes from, I think, at some avenues of the show, from memory serves. Like, I want to say at some point that the mech, I think, probably does come from, like, the actual mansion itself, but, like, I'm kind of guessing here. Like, I'm trying to, like, exactly figure out if I'm right about that, because it's been such a long time since the viewing of the show to just be certain about exactly anything. So Roger is to need to go on and figure out where exactly that Dorothy had went to. At some point during the battle, she had just disappeared, and so Roger has to go on and put the pieces of the puzzle together of where to find her. So Roger then goes back into his car to do a drive where we'll come to find that the city is kind of putting itself back together. We'll find that there is a crane with clock pieces, that there's a clock that there is to go on and be uh, Roger kind of recounting the dialogue uh, with um, Soldano, and I'm trying to figure out where the heck my placing is of all this. So yeah, I think I'm right about where so Roger goes on to try to figure out where Dorothy is, and he drives his way back to his mansion, sits on his couch, and is to take the time to figure things out. But if anything, Roger doesn't feel that exactly he should need to figure this all out and forget it all, because technically his client is dead and technically the sisters are free, and if anything he should just go on and just let everything go. And then Roger realizes that he still has to go on and protect Dorothy. That was his assignment. That was the task that he took upon. So Roger takes one of his hourglasses, the one of many of which that he has, and at one point we even have Dorothy that takes every one of the hourglasses and she adjusts every single one of them, having them all pour out the sand, um, as this interesting bit of visual here that is to go on and just be like, okay, why do we need any of these things to be just done here, or presented here? I guess it's just the visual of it. So, but I like hourglasses. I have one myself, somewhere within the place of this room, um, of which that I'm to go on and be like, okay, where exactly can I point to where it is within this room? I have no idea. If anything, yeah, like I should probably go on and figure that out because it's a glass item. But anyways, but pushing on here, so Roger goes back into his car and starts driving through the city. We see at a certain point homeless people, and we have Roger that makes his way back to his big-eared guy that is kind of giving him information. So within this bit of convo or conversation, the big ear is to go on and bring up the whole thing about the nightingale and how this is an old fairy tale and it being a bedtime story. So as further and further that Roger is to be like, yeah, this nightingale thing, like the big ear is bringing this up. So if anything, yeah, Soldano had also mentioned about the nightingale. Like, what is it about this thing? So Roger again thrusts money down on the table and then leaves. Roger goes on to find this nightclub called Nightingale and investigates that location. Roger goes on and is to be face to face with a bouncer that won't really let him in. The bouncer mentions to Roger about how this club is by invitation only and he's not a member, so he's probably not going to be able to get into this club. So as Roger goes on and starts to walk off here, he all of a sudden notices both Timothy Wainwright and Dorothy and then follows them back into the club. So, as again, Roger is to be met by this bouncer as both Dorothy and then as both Timothy start to talk to Roger. There seems to be that Roger can go into this club and is to be kind of being able to enter it by association of these two people. So Roger starts talking to Dorothy, and it seems that Dorothy at this point is to be a person that Roger has to kind of re-get to know again. That it seems that if anything, like Dorothy's to kind of feel like a different person right now. Like almost making me kind of confused of like, okay, is this Dorothy to be somehow reprogrammed, or is this to be the actual human Dorothy? What's going on here? But no, we just come to find out that when Dorothy is to kind of remember who her father is, like she is to kind of be a different person. And that different person is to not be the same that Roger is to be very familiar with, and so I got a little lost there. So Timothy is to go on and have Dorothy go up onto the stage and sing this song. Well, come to find that Dorothy is to be a person that just kind of imitates or mimics everything because she's an android. This is to be very much like Star Trek The Next Generation, where Data will go on and not being able to come up with original art stuff himself. He then goes on and is to just kind of copy from things, or he is to just try to, like, whatever he is to see, he is to then paint. And eventually to the point of trying to come up with something on his own, because Data wants to eventually try to strive to become more human. But so, getting back to the point here, we have Dorothy that goes up on stage and sings this song. Timothy goes on to sit next to this piano player, and Timothy is to listen to Dorothy and have tears in his eyes, or is to just be very emotional because he just really always is to love Dorothy doing this song. So we'll come to find the whole story of the Nightingale and talk about how there is this ancient story about a song coming from a mechanical bird. And so as Dorothy goes on and leaves the stage, Roger is to realize that Dorothy was to go on and be in a search of her father as soon after she was to go on and see him in the crowd. And have his supposed memories breathe life into Dorothy. That's why she's somewhat different than she is right now. So, if anything, I guess Dorothy going on and seeing Wainwright kind of had her kind of remember who she was, and that's why she just kind of left Dan without any kind of real processing of anything. So, all of a sudden, Roger ends up having a gun into his back, and Beck then appears. We would then go on to have Wainwright, or Timothy, who's to share the exact same fate, as a gun is to go into Wainwright's back. And so Beck is to mention Roger how he is a fair man. And if anything, this is again another negotiation. So Roger is to want to go on and obtain Dorothy, but as one of his goons try to grab on Dorothy, he realizes how Dorothy is way too heavy to try to grasp. Dorothy goes on and takes the goon, grabs him, and flings him and throws him onto the ground. Dorothy gets ever so much closer to Timothy Wainwright, and the goon ends up getting a little scared, to the point where his gun goes off and Wainwright goes down on the ground with blood splatter. Beck is to taser both Dorothy and both Roger. And the next thing we are to see is that there is now a chalk outline. Timothy is now dead, and both Dan and both Roger are to be going on and looking at a crime scene. So we have at one point where this crime scene is to be interrupted, as Dan is to be told that there is a giant robot that is wreaking havoc upon the town. And as Dan leaves, Roger is to notice a strange metal device that to me looks like one of those pieces that you would go on and you would like, if you guys remember jewelry boxes, you would come to find that a lot of jewelry boxes would have this kind of cranking device that eventually would start out some kind of song within it. And that seems to be the object that Roger is to find on the ground and take with him. That's what it looks like to me. I don't exactly understand what this actual piece was, but that's what the piece looks like to me. A cranking device from a jewelry box in a very large form. Very much the size of almost Roger's hand. So Roger takes this thing and then he leaves to call out for Big O. So we come to find within Dorothy 1 that this time around Beck is actually going on from a distance and controlling this thing from this van nearby that has a satellite dish on top of it. Beck's plan is still to go back to that bank to try to obtain those plates from before. And so, as Roger is to fire up the Big O and is to again get that scrolling of text that we get to see every single time this happens, we then go on and have Dan again realize, like, oh, the Megaduce is coming again. So the Megaduce arrives from the ground, or the Big O, and we have Beck that is to just be fairly annoyed about the Big O. Like, okay, who's the guy behind all the, who's the guy behind this mech? Why is he going on and why is he consistently coming for me? So round 2 of the battle between the two behemoths continue. At this time around, we have Dorothy 1 that uses its tentacles as a early attack, and Big O dodges them. Eventually there is buildings to be smashed into, and Roger is to try to figure out, wait a minute, like, if its power transfer circuit is to go on and be ripped out, what is actually powering up this mech? It makes no sense. So eventually, within further inspection, Roger realizes that the headpiece of this now Dorothy 1 is to have now been modified. Roger is to realize that at its headpiece, there is to be none other than Dorothy that seems to be powering this mech. And Roger's to realize, like, oh, this is going to be a lot harder for me to go on and battle Dorothy 1, as there is to be Dorothy within it to be now held hostage. So, as now Dorothy 1 is starting to make a bit more of an attack, is tentacling the Big O, and then going into having a drill come from one of its hands. We realize that this could be at a point where there's nothing that the Big O could really do. So, and we even have Dan who's like, hey, why isn't the Big O fighting back? Because he doesn't realize that there is a person within inside the head of Dorothy 1, because he just can't see it. It's too obstructing of his view to be able to notice something like that. So, as the Big O dodges the drill and the drill goes crashing into one of the buildings, Roger takes a grappler, a hook-like device, thrusting from his hand, or probably from his watch, I would assess or assume. So, Roger grapples on to the headpiece of Dorothy 1 and goes swinging into rescuing Dorothy, ripping her from these wires to eventually have then Dorothy 1 lose power and fall over. With Beck kind of screaming uh, in anger of him losing here. So shortly thereafter that, as Roger pulls the headpiece from Dorothy, this just kind of gold piece that is to be attached to Dorothy's head. We have Norman that mentions to Roger how it's like, well, dinner's ready, sir. And Roger's like, well, that's good, but I'll be late for it because he has something else that he needs to get to. So Beck is now realizing, as his goons are to kind of wake him up within this chair, that they need to get the heck out of there because eventually the Big O or someone else will go on and discover where they are at. So they need to hurry, they need to run. All of a sudden, we come to find the Big O is to figure out exactly where this van is and is to pull it from it starting to pull away. And the Big O is to take this van and is to drop it. And shortly thereafter that, the goons all come flying from the vehicle, all wrapped up in these wires. And Dan is to be there also and arrest them all. The next thing we see is a gravesite that is to have Wainwright on it. And we then would have Roger that is to put the craking device that he had obtained from the crime scene before and put it on the gravesite. As Roger makes his way to now the balcony of this building, he goes on and starts talking to Dorothy. And Roger is to mention about Dorothy's outfit. And Dorothy's to say, it's like, well, yeah, like I'm wearing this because now I'm going to go on and work with you. And Dorothy says this because she has no other place to go. All of the people that she is to be a family to or to all be dead at this point. So, if anything, Dorothy now needs to go on and just live with Roger because where else is she going to go? So, Roger is to go on and say here, it's like, well, hey, I'll go on and I'll have you live and work alongside me only on one condition, that you all that there's to be one rule and you're to always wear black because we all wear black here. Dorothy starts to look around and notices that Norman is to wear black and then Roger is to wear black. And then Dorothy looks at Roger and says, hey, you really you really reeks. And then we cut to the end of the episode. We have come to terms. So the following next episode, we have Roger, and he's in this bed trying to sleep because he just likes to sleep in. And all of a sudden, off in the distance, we have Dorothy playing this piano very loudly. So eventually, this whole piano playing thing will be a joke that at some point Roger will talk about later. About the only thing that can wake them up is somebody playing the piano, which is kind of funny. So there's a callback to this whole opening of this episode. So Roger goes on to investigate the piano playing, and here's where Roger notices as this girl's playing, it's like, oh, well, if anything, you can't come up with a piano song originally, you just have to mimic other people. So Dorothy is to go on and try to wake up Roger by playing this piano because Roger's eggs are going cold. And so Roger goes on and makes his way to eat his eggs. And we have Dorothy that is drinking this coffee, which is very unusual for an android to be actually consuming a beverage of any kind or wanting to go on and consume anything that is to be of a meal or food or drink or what have you. So all of a sudden, the electricity in the room is to all of a sudden all fade out. And we would have Roger that turns to Norman, and Norman is saying, yeah, that has been happening quite frequently lately. All of a sudden, Dorothy, through her forehead, is to have this kind of disc of a thing come out, and light is to turn on within it. To where they can go on and kind of continue eating here. So, Roger is to be informed that there is to be a woman for him to speak to. And eventually, Roger is to make his way down from this elevator to make his way to a woman that is to be called Miss Casey. But further inspection, Casey will go on and have her own name, which is Angel, which it seems to be, no matter what this woman's name is, the always constant is Angel. That never seems to change. Because we'll find out that this girl is to go by whatever name that she really needs to get the job done. So, because we find out that she is to be just this weird agent of a woman that, like, weird to just be like, okay, why is it that she's going by so many of these names? I guess it really doesn't matter because she's just this attractive woman that we just have to go on and just be satisfied by having her just being a part of the story. So, Angel is to mention, or Miss Casey is to mention about how she is to be a part of the Paradim group, which Roger will go on and say that he really doesn't want much of affiliation with them, that eventually, whenever they are to have a problem, he hopes that they can solve it themselves. But if anything, just the curiosity gets the best of him. And so he decides to go in and be a part of this job, regardless. So, because if anything, also, like, him going on and investigating about how the electricity seems to be going down is to be a thing that is kind of afflicting everybody. So Roger kind of feels obligated to need to go on and do this investigation, regardless of how much he doesn't want to go on and be involved in the paradimming or Digim group. But anyways, we get to Act 3, Electric City. So Roger makes his way to his car, and here's where he goes on and he talks about uh, the Paradigm group, and he talks about his feelings about it, and that he's always had this rule about not being affiliated with them. And I've kind of already stated all this, so if anything, because it's all about going on and like there's certain sections of these cities where it just feels like people should not be crossing paths. I don't know what it is. It just seems like there eventually will be a point where there are people that are to go on and tend to not be like there's this whole dome thing that's to be part of the city. And there's at one point where Dan says, yeah, normally people don't go outside of this dome, but for some odd reason this person decided to. But that's normally just not something that everyone that people do. So yeah, so like it's kind of like these people that are to have their certain areas that they we are to go on and make their way to. So a lot of this dialogue is to probably be lost by a number of people. So I apologize if I'm not getting to any certain kind of points. I'm just trying to figure out my best way to talk about all this dialogue, or probably reiterate it, to try to figure out what I can say next, because it's very difficult for me to talk about every one of these episodes. So, if this is just coming off as just me just repeating myself, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this all out. So, as Angel leaves, she goes on and mentions about how Roger is to have a bit of a reputation, and she walks off. And I'm trying to figure out exactly where my next thing is here. Um, so Roger makes his drive to Electric City. Oddly enough, Roger will have thought that he's going to this Electric City alone, but then he'll come to find that Angel is also there with him. So it's kind of odd that Roger needs to go on and do this investigation, because it feels like he is kind of being um, followed by Angel, and it's like, okay, why exactly did he need to have been called to go here when really someone else is going to be sent with him? But anyways, let's push on here. Like, it's the whole mystery about this town. So as Roger further investigates Electric City and notices that it seems to be a town without power, Roger is to go on and figure out where the power exactly is. He goes to try to find where the power plant of this town is to be located. So he makes his way to this power plant and discovers the location of it and is like, oh, there it is. So as Roger makes his way to this gated area and realizes that the gate is to be completely chained and locked up, to the point of Roger realizing, like, oh, so people are trying to avoid me getting into this power plant, and there has to be a reason for that. All of a sudden, there's to be a rifle, or a rifle that gets thrusted into Roger's back, and a number of people upon this town that all have lanterns and are pushing Roger to make their way into meeting up with basically their spokesman of this town, who ends up going by the name of uh, of Dareth, Dareth. Um, Please excuse me if I'm ill pronouncing that. Uh, but anyways, as Roger is to go on and speak with Dareth, Dareth is to mention about how his town is to be very primitive, and if Roger is to go on and just call them all that, it's completely okay. So they go on and they speak of the the lightning of wrath coming from God. And Roger doesn't quite understand that, of why it's occurring. That he doesn't really believe that that could actually be occurring within this town, but within further investigation, he will come to find out why that is to be said, because there, of course, to be this eel monster that is to be wreaking havoc upon this town and is to have this lightning like attack. So that, I guess, could be construed as the wrath of God, and so on. So So Roger makes his way to this cabin and is to eventually make his way to this laboratory. And then all of a sudden he's to be met by this rifle going to the back of his head, knocking him down. So Roger is now being tied up within this cabin to meet with this man who is to be called the Old Man. It seems that most of the time he is to be having a name of, but his actual name is to be Seven Mariski or Mariski. Um, but I'm just gonna keep calling him the Old Man because that seems to be the one title that is to be dubbed by this character. And if I say Seven, a lot of people could just be like, "Well, who is really this character, anyways?" So, as Roger is to speak with this old man in his cabin, it is quite funny because this old man is bringing in these buckets of water, and the old man is mentioning about how lazy Roger is because as he used to get knocked out, he used to sleep for quite a bit of time. So, as this man is kind of struggling with these buckets of water, Roger gets up from his chair of which that he was tied up in and helps the man with these water buckets to get to the location of pouring these water buckets into where it's to be going. And then the old man looks at the chair to realize that Roger has completely escaped from his chair. Is like, oh, like this guy is really good. So Roger goes on and starts making eggs for this old man. And so they start to get to know one another. They start to get to know about the town, and Roger is to speak about how he's to have been this private investigator or this negotiator. So Roger is to continue to ask questions to this old man out of pure curiosity. And eventually it seems that there is no more attacks coming between the two of them. It seems that the old man is to figure out that Roger is not a real threat to him. And so the old man just continues to go about his normal day and just lets Roger be to kind of take a drink of this coffee or this tea or whatever is to be coming from this pot as the old man goes on and starts with an axe just shucking wood. So as Roger starts to investigate this cabin, he goes on and finds that there is to be this carpet that as he starts touching it, it seems that he is to go on and find some underground door that Roger can then open. Roger makes his way down to this laboratory and comes to find that there is a bit of destruction there. And as Roger further investigates, he finds this picture of what the old man had looked like in the past. And all of a sudden, as Roger is to further do investigations, all of a sudden, a bit of electricity is coursing through the room. And Roger's to be quite confused because he's like, wait a minute, like, I didn't even touch anything. So all of a sudden, all this electricity is coursing through this entire room, forcing then Roger, for safety reasons, to avoid uh, investigating any further into this laboratory, to, if anything, run from out of the place of which that he came, to eventually to be meet back up with the old man to find out uh, that somebody had started the turbines and had turned on the power. And the old man is to grab Roger and is to ask him, like, hey, who sent you? Like, who is with you? And Roger is to go on and say, hey, I came alone, or I came on my own fruition. So the old man and Roger make their way to this stairwell that has this door that is eventually leading uh, Roger to this very much underground facility that has this large number of stairs that Roger is forced to make his way through. So the old man hands Roger this flashlight before he goes, and Roger is to eventually make his way into this underground facility. Eventually, Roger is to bump into none other than Angel yet again. That's how they meet one another in this environment. And Roger is to have this flashlight on Angel. And so as they meet, uh, he realizes that Angel is in a much different outfit than she was prior. She's in this almost like leather, almost Black Widow, if you guys remember that Marvel character, Esh like outfit where she's all like leathered down and what have you. But this outfit is not to be black. It's much more of like a pinkish, reddish kind of a approach of outfit. So as the two of them start to make their way through this underground facility, trying to figure out the perfect route here, and Roger is to assume that maybe Angel is something that he may have not have wanted to have taken this job after all, because of how untrustworthy she can actually be and how there's so much mystery with this Angel woman about how she is to go on and not really be who he thought that she was. So as the two of them continue to talk, there is this surge of electricity that goes through this area of which that they are in, forcing then Roger to thrust Angel onto the ground, as well as also him hitting the duck as well, to avoid uh, them getting hurt here, hoping that the ground will uh, have them not be electrified here. So as they end up getting up, all of a sudden from the pipes from the side of them, they end up bursting, and there seems to be a bit of water coming from all of them. So now Roger and now Angel have to be running from out of this facility, as it's, of course, having the water further and further rise. So Angel is to confess that all she was to have gone on and done was to reactivate the turbines. And that was a poor decision to make. Because eventually reactivating the power was to go on and have a chain reaction of having the eel monster attack this town again. So as Roger and as Angel make their way out of the facility that they had run their way into escaping, the people of the town are to go on and discover that there's something coming from the water. And that thing will ultimately go on and be the eel monster that is to start to wreak havoc upon the town. So Angel and Roger are now running from the side of this monster, and Angel is trying to discover what exactly this thing is. So Roger is to assess about the laboratory and the giant tank that was within it, and discovering that within that laboratory they had gone on and probably gotten to the early stage of this eel, but the eel had probably continued on to grow because of electricity. And that's what gone on to make this even more larger eel monster over time. So the eel is to come from out of its mouth electrical attack come from it. And so Angel is to just run to her car, hoping that she can drive away from this threat. And Angel is to say to Roger that her job is over here. That's why she's going on and running to her car to evade what this monster really is. So Roger gets out his watch and calls for the Big O. And Norman is to call to Roger and explain that the Big O should be arriving in about 15 mere seconds. So as Roger is running here, we have at one point where Angel in her car is to say, it's like, well, hey, Roger, if you don't die, maybe we'll get together sometime. Which I thought was hilarious. So as Angel drives off, she's all of a sudden to be met by the eel, and her car ends up getting electrified with her inside of it. Because, of course, if you think about it, a car has a battery. So, if anything, with this car in motion, it's the only thing that kind of has electricity going on in it, technically, because of the car battery. So, hence why the eel is to attack it, because it's the closest source of power, which is to be this car. So, Roger is to get within the Big O, and again, the text of Scroll is to come across here. So, as Angel now gets out of her car, of course, a thing that she can no longer use, Angel is to see the Big O coming from out of the ground, and we of course have the people of the Electric City who's to cry out. It's like, hey, what is that? So the Big O is to face off against the eel, and consistent times the Big O is to be electrified, and Roger is to feel that electricity surge through him and be in pain. So the eel, with its large mouth, grasps onto the Big O's shoulder and latches on, electrifying him consistently. So as the Big O tries to use its pistons coming from its arm to try and create some distance, we then would go on to have the eel do some electric attacks, and we would then go on and have the Big O that is to continue to suffer from this monster trying to consume the Big O. We see this big, huge mouth open, as if this is almost to be like somewhat of a snake-like attack, hoping that this monster is going to completely consume the Big O, of which that it doesn't. So we also come to find that the eel is trying to come up with any near electrical source um, to consume within it while also attacking the Big O. There seems to be the turbines coming from what I believe is the dam or whatever is to be this electrical source that's nearby. So that is to go on and continue to electrify not only the eel to kind of consume this source of electricity, but also is to consistently electrify the Big O. Having Roger feeling the electricity coursing through his mega deuce and just kind of writhing in agony. So Roger wants to go on and use his Chrome Buster attack, which is to be this attack where he launches this laser coming through his head and has this big blast of a thing. But then all of a sudden he sees the old man, Seven, that is to be having this bit uh, of scuba diving outfit on and is on this boat trying to make its way to the power plant to try and shut off the power. Eventually, Roger will then realize that he can't go on and use his Chrome Buster attack, and then he's just waiting to see what exactly the old man will actually do. So, at some point, Roger will realize that the old man is climbing up this ladder, and he's like, oh, he's trying to turn the power off. Great, he's trying to help me. So, shortly thereafter, as the Big O is to create some distance from this eel, and eventually there seems to be a tongue that lunges out and is grasping the Big O's neck. We then would have the old man that turns out all of the turbines and hits all these toggles. And so that then has the electricity starting to no longer come from the eel. And then shortly thereafter that, the Big O can use its Chrome Buster attack, which is to be this laser, and the laser coming from its head ends up tearing through the head from the neck of the monster and completely just kind of tears through it, killing it and having it fall indefinitely. Having the city just kind of rejoicing in the victory of the Big O, and talking about a legend and talking about a titan and going on. And the next thing we see is them talking about concluding the negotiations. So, and them kind of recapping about what is to kind of be the fallout of everything that occurred within this within the aftermath of this story. Talking about the old man and talking about how Paradigm had gone on to take some samples of this monster, and Paradigm, whatever this company is, like there's a whole bit of dialogue that I just want to try to escape as much as possible because I want to get through the rest of these because I know how long this is already being. Because I know I would try to get like under 2 hours for this, but it's kind of hard because there's so much stuff that I have to talk about, and I'm even to have to go on and need to talk about a whole nother episode. So we now have Roger that makes his way back to the mansion, and we again have Dorothy that's playing this piano. And this time around, Dorothy is going on and playing the blues, and Roger is so baffled by that music choice. And Dorothy is to say, it's like, well, hey, every once in a while, I'm to feel that I want to go on and play the blues. And Roger's like, wait a minute, like, you feel that you want to play the blues? Like, that just seems just kind of strange. So, Roger is to go on and be like, well, fine, I guess if you say so. So, now we get into the last episode here. So, now we come to find them within this episode needing to much more talk about the subway and how Roger would go on and say, yeah, most of the time I would just use the subway station to have this to transport the Big O, and I didn't think of anything of it. But eventually, within this episode, there'll be a lot more focus on needing to have Roger make his way into the underground to investigate about this lost city and investigate more about the Dark Forest and the archetype mech that he has to face off against. So, Roger goes on to find that he has another job. And so he takes his car and he makes his way uh, to meet up with a woman. Uh, and as he goes on and does so, it seems that this woman is to actually be called Patricia Lovejoy. But if anything, Roger would be like, wait a minute, weren't you to be known by Miss Casey before? And Angel is to go on and say, like, well, yeah, I'm known by very many names, but if anything, you could always continue to call me Angel. So Angel is to inform Roger about this case uh, as they make their way through this train car and into this building, and so eventually Roger goes on and is to find out that all this case is to be dealing with the underground subway station, and eventually is to also to be involved with a reporter who is to be Michael Seabach, a reporter of the Paradigm Press. So the latest story that he's been working on uh, is to be something that the company doesn't want him to do, so they're kind of forcing him into retirement uh, because of how they don't want this story to get out. And if anything, that forces then Roger to need to make his way to meet up with this Michael character, this reporter, and eventually, when meeting up with him, that eventually gets us to the unraveling of what this episode is going to eventually be about. So, Roger then makes his way to then Dan, and as the two of them are to go on and be talking here, they talk about Michael and how he's this German guy and how this character has gone missing and has had unpaid taxes for the last 2 months, and he is to have been a character that is to have uh, gone on to have left the dome. And for those kind of people, that is never normally something that you should go on and actually do. So there's a reason for this guy to have gone on and done this. So Roger ends up getting this paper of address that is to lead him to Michael coming from Dan. And so eventually Roger is to leave shortly thereafter that. And Dan goes on and takes this photo that he had gone on to kind of push down to prop back up again. And it's a photo of Dan and Roger together in this photo. It's like, well, we've already seen this photo at some point in the past in Roger's place, but now we're seeing it again in Dan's office. So now we have Roger making his way to this apartment building to try and figure out where Michael now is. So as Roger makes his way to Michael's place, he uncovers a big amount of these old fashioned films that are all in these metal cans. He goes on to find this typewriter and just a number of just large amounts of just hoarded items. Hoarding means like we would go on to find these just largest assortment of things that are to just kind of be placed all over a room to kind of make this character look very crazed. As Roger makes his way into this room, all of a sudden there seems to be gasoline that is be pouring into it, and then all of a sudden the room is to start to be lit on fire. Roger goes on to eventually notice the gasoline just in time to rush out of the room and escapes it. Going on to thrust out of a window and get his uh, his hook or his gaplin or his gapling gun like thing to go off, so that way he can hook onto the building, so he can kind of jostle from off of it. So Roger is to all of a sudden notice from the rooftop a silhouette of a figure. So Roger himself gets the rooftop and then starts talking to this silhouetted figure to come to find out who he is. So as Roger further and further notices this man that is almost kind of through the face, like very like has a mummy like appearance to himself, and then eventually has this kind of trench coat and suit and tie. But if anything else, all the rest of his body is to be very mummified. So the further as Roger is to speak with him, he is to find out that this guy is to now be Michael, that is going by a completely other name, which eventually is to come off as Dark Forest or Black Forest. And we now cut back to Roger speaking with Dorothy as they're both on this rooftop. At one point, it seems interesting as Dorothy is asking if Roger is cold, and she's asking about his health. And this just kind of line of dialogue is just like, okay, where is this going? So, if anything, like I can't really understand exactly where it's going. And so, cutting back, Roger is to go on and make his way into the subway and go into the underground and eventually find this laptop like computer that has glass all over it, and these subways are all disheveled. So Roger then goes on to make his way down this ladder with this flashlight of his, and eventually the flashlight drops. Weirdly, all of a sudden, Roger is to be afraid. He's to be scared. And he's to find it weird that he is to be so terrified here that his body just kind of gives up and he falls down this ladder. Roger is to just be so weirded out by him having this heavy emotion, as normally he doesn't feel that way. So as Roger tries to struggle to get back up, all of a sudden he's in presence of this hallway like area that seems to have the presence of a paranormal or a ghost like bit of things that are to be walking through this same area that Roger is in. So Roger all of a sudden is to have this brief moment of unconsciousness where he's looking up at what seems to be his mother, and then all of a sudden wakes up from this daze and notices Dorothy there. Dorothy will go on and reflect to the fact that Roger ends up saying the words mother. It's like, hey, what were you talking about? And Roger is like, never mind. Let's just kind of get to what what we were here for. Like, let's get back to business. So the two of them make their way further into this underground, and eventually there is a reflection upon Dorothy's actual father and him dying, and and also bringing up the whole fact of the whole dead daughter thing. Uh, like, man, I'm really having a stymied problem like with this last episode, trying to decipher everything. So finally, Roger and Dorothy make their way through this hallway. Like, I'm trying to having I'm really having a tough time to decipher at some points through this specific episode what exactly is important and what's relevant for me to speak and talk about here, because I really just want to keep pushing on and just trying to figure out where exactly to just kind of wrap up here. So Roger and Dorothy make their way through this hallway to find that there is this lost city that is underneath this area. So as the two of them uncover this lost city and they start walking through it, eventually here's where they notice this Megadeus. And they then notice that Dark Forest is to be on the shoulder of it. Roger is to kind of forget what the name of this guy is. At first point, he calls him Michael, and then he says, "Oh, you're Schwarzwald." Um, Schwarzwald is kind of what he ends up saying that his German name is. But if anything, I pull away from it as Black Forest. So Roger is to assess that this is to be the Big O's archetype or the prototype of this character. And eventually the archetype starts to turn on and colors start to flash from its chest. So Black Forest is to mention about how 40 years ago something happened and they all had lost their memory. And there is to be a forgotten, untold power that they had all possessed. And something like the Megadeus was to be nothing really special, but maybe through its possession of power, that in some ways they could go on and regain their memories. And Black Forest is hoping that with this Megadeus, that this is a power that he can have. So Roger is to ask if the Megadeus is to be operational. And Black Forces say that he has released the locks of it, and for my troubles eventually unraveling all of this, Lost City and Megadeus, eventually for Michael, eventually the way he is to look is what he has become. And I'm getting lost in so much of the dialogue here. So we push in to having the Black Forest whip out this lighter, and as the archetype again is glowing within its chest, we all of a sudden have Dorothy, whose mouth is to continue to open, and weirdly she is to just spout all of this like weird, goofy, technical, blah, 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 kind of weird sounds coming out of her mouth. So as the Megadeus starts to move here, all of a sudden we then had Black Forest, who thrusts its lighter, and Roger is to, through the flames of this lighter, thrust through it, and Black Forest is now confused. Okay, why did this Megadeus move? Like, what has happened? So realizing that now the archetype is now alive, it's a living thing. So Roger is to, of course, go on and call for the Big O. And so we have Roger that is calling upon Norman and asking how long it's going to take for, of course, the Big O to get there. And it is kind of funny at this point because now Norman is prepping for dinner, and Norman is looking at the oven and looking at this meat and saying to Roger, it's like, oh, well, like, the meat will be kind of done soon. And Norman has no idea of anything that's going on within this battle, which is just kind of funny. So both Roger and Dorothy are now running through this lost city, and the archetype is grasping its hands to stop both Dorothy and both Roger from getting anywhere, and eventually it ends up that the archetype traps them into a location. Dorothy is spouting nonsense about how this cannot be, that she has no connection with the archetype, that she wants no relation with it, and this can't be. So, as the two of them end up getting trapped, we now have the Dark Forest that is to understand what is going on. So, Roger ends up getting into the Mega Deuce and the Big O, and he starts to face off against this ghost within this machine. So as the two of them battle, we have where the archetype is to eventually take some punches from the Big O, but then eventually also the archetype is to jump on top of the Big O and kind of like lock in to the Big O's body, to where the Big O has to try to either kind of like flip, kind of roll over the archetype to try to get away from it. But this thing just continues to just hop onto the Big O and tries to attack it that way. Getting to the point where the Big O has to take rockets coming from out of its chest to fire upon the archetype, hoping that that is to be an impactful move, that is to take this thing out, of which that it does end up taking it out as this big attack. So, thank God we're almost home here. So, after this kind of big rubble and the smoke clears, eventually we go right back to Roger and Dorothy at that balcony, or at this rooftop, where they're to go on and talk about temperature and asking if Dorothy gets cold because of out of pure curiosity. So, having Roger state about how Dorothy is such a complicated android, and the next thing we cut to is the rail station that has the subway underground. And throughout the episode, we just consistently see this water dropping onto this piece and creating this ripple effect. So I think that some decisions upon every episode is probably just an artistic thing, or just to just try it, just to probably have people just be so bothered by it and ask why it occurs. But if anything, by the end of the episode, it says the words "no side," and then we cut to credits. So thank God, because I was really struggling through this last episode. Man, there was really times where, like, I was very unsure about how to go on and do every one of these episodes. Like, I was to think that this was going to be one where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to complete. But luckily, I have. I am going to put this up, and I'm going to have to just be fine about it. If anything, there are some times where I can really go on and I can really get through a review and really get through perfectly a way of trying to cut through it all. But then there's sometimes where I get completely at a gap of like, what the heck am I saying here? I have no idea what I'm really trying to need to focus upon. And there's just some episodes where I'm just like, this dialogue doesn't make much sense to me now, that I've taken a gap of time because I decided to sleep, instead of to just do this interview fresh in my mind. And so there's certain episodes where there's just kind of gaps of like, what the heck is going on here? I have to figure it out. Also, it just kind of gets mush into my brain when I go on and I have to cover so many episodes. Eventually, there's going to be just some episode somewhere where I'm just going to get stymied by, and that ends up being usually the very last episode, where I'm just like trying to figure out in my brain. I'm like, how am I going to figure this out? And it's just hard. It's just very difficult. So, you know what? If I go on and if I really mess or F this up, like, then I have to just go on and say, well, like, that's just how I was to attack this day. And if anything, like, my mistake now will help me, like, learn in the future of, like, okay, like, so it seems at the very last episode, I'm just to have problems, try to figure and put the piece of the puzzle of this together. Like, I would go on and also in the Power Rangers bit of episodes that I just reviewed, I also on the very last episode was like, I don't know exactly what's going on here. Like, I'm just very confused. And so I had to just kind of pause there and have to really think it through and then come back to it and like, okay, like yeah, there's just sometimes where I have to take breaks and I have to pause things and I have to just kind of like, okay, uh like there are certain videos where I kept having to pause the video to think about where to go next. Uh because it's hard to do some of these reviews. Not every bit of this content is so easy to come up with things to say. Um because some of the stuff is just so strange or some of it is just like so like okay, what was actually going on here? Like where is the important thing to just kind of cliff note this out to figure out how to get through this scene or this part of this beat or whatever. Um, because if anything, I'm trying to get as much detail as I can through all of these things, but also realizing that like it takes so much time to cover all this stuff. So I'm trying to figure out like the best way and the quickest way possible to rattle all this off, and then realizing how much I'm ranting after the fact and just being like, yeah, like this is so difficult, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, hey, I didn't have to do this review. Like, I could have chosen to do any other content. Even though I technically had a certain set of things planned, like, I could have just been like, bashaw, all that, and I could have just swung it and just kind of done whatever I want to do. Like, there is some stuff that is just easier content than others, but I also want to, at some points, just kind of challenge myself. And I also want to go on and like realize that there's only so much content that is left on Earth, uh, that I could still review. But also, there's endless amount of shows and movies and stuff that are just still coming out as new releases. And there's been quite a bit of new releases where I just could not be bothered to check out, even though there could be people that are interested in new releases and want me to review those. Yeah, every time I just go into like, okay, here's this old retro thing that I saw once, or here's something that I know exists, so why not cover this? But yeah, but that is the things that I stumble upon every day, and I kind of weigh back and forth of whether or not I should review. Like there's some times where I'm kind of tempted to want to review new releases, and then like stuff like Send Help will actually be a thing that I review. Uh, right now, sadly, like there's gonna get to a point that is gonna actually get close to actually my birthday, where like normally I would go on and have a movie that comes out right around my birthday, but there is even this year where that isn't really happening. So I'm just like, so what the heck am I gonna do for this year? And this year is to really just kind of at this point to just do absolutely nothing. Like there's nowhere I can go, there's nothing I can do, and it kind of feels just like COVID all over again. Whereas like COVID, whereas like okay, like there's no movies coming out, like there's nowhere I can go, like so I just sat at home and there was nothing I could do. Um, Even once we got past COVID, I was like, okay, but still, like I'm just kind of left with having to feel forced to go to the movie theater because that's the only thing that I could do. Um, And even that was just kind of like, I don't even really want to go to this movie to see it in the theater, but at least it's just something to do. Uh, I ended up seeing, like, I think Fall Guys was like around the time, or it was like around my birthday. So I was like, okay, I'll just see this movie because there's nothing else out. So I have to go on and be able to do something, at least for my birthday. Like at one point, there was actually an importance upon that day. Like I would go on and I would take like a whole vacation, and I would really try to, like, if anything, when I had the financial ability to do so, like I would really go on, and that in like Christmas time, I would probably spend way too much money than I probably should have, going on and trying to get certain items to be like, okay, this is going to be um, my birthday thing, this is going to be my Christmas thing, and regardless of whatever my family was going to get for me for that holiday, like I would just be always be happy because I'm like, okay, like I got something for myself, and I'm going to be happy about that bit of stuff. And then eventually it just kind of got on to just like I probably was to probably spend way too much than I probably should have. And because I was always thinking that I would always have a job that would be able to just keep giving me money, or would go on, and I always thought that I would just like have this job that eventually would go and it'd be better, and eventually the job just got worse. So with that said, uh, hopefully there is at some points where I can go on and hopefully do something out of YouTube, and hopefully have this be the big turnaround. But if anything, like there is always hope. There is always hanging on to hope, but then also there is to be like a realistic, naive kind of thing about me, where it's just like, man, uh, like hopefully at some point, uh, because I'm hoping to eventually go on and obtain some items in the future here that will really help me gratefully or greatly, uh, within just more outfits for thumbnails. But I'm like, man, is that all of which that I'm doing now? Like, am I just trying to get all these clothes just so that I can use them for a thumbnail? Which kind of is like, ugh, like there are some times where I try to just get certain stuff just for me, um, because like in my mind, I'm to go on and be like, hey, if I get stuff that is just for me, then um, at least I can just kind of wear those whatever, or I can wear those as like a profile picture piece, and maybe at some point I can justify using it somewhere where like I have like comic book content. Maybe I can use that as a different thing being placed in a thumbnail or something like that. But yeah, I'm at least trying to get some certain things just for me instead of having it just be all for the thumbnail bit of content. Also, it's like it's stuff that I can finally obtain now. Because like I've been wanting to try to strive to not only get stuff for thumbnails, like obviously like Power Ranger stuff. I'm trying to get stuff that is for movies and shows, but I'm also just trying to get like Marvel and DC like comic book stuff, of shirts of that, because that's always where my passion was to try to continue to obtain these costume shirts, of which that I love. Just I love costume shirts. That could be things that are to be um, like my passion. I enjoy that. At some point, I was kind of tempted to even just do a video about it, just talking about these costume shirts, uh, for how much I have so many of them, and why not just like show them all off. But like a video like that could probably be fun. A video like that could probably be something that actually could maybe do some kind of click of some kind of something. Um, but either way, I have so effing many of them, that it probably will be hard to like pull all those out. So I'm trying to decipher how exactly to approach that and do that. But either way, that could probably be a thing that I could make videos of at some point in the future. But like, I absolutely love the whole like costume and cosplay, and so like I am that kind of person that just like when I go in and I say I really like to actually be all these characters in these thumbnails, it's true. Like, I really love the fun challenge of taking every item out of my closet and figuring out how to have that be a character within every one of these things and match it up. Like, it's fun for me. It's that fun challenge. Yeah, there's sometimes where I look at the photo or the picture and I'm like, like I'm not exactly happy about how it exactly came out, but like I've gotten to a point where like for these thumbnails, I would go on and endlessly take so many pictures. Like I would take like 10 pictures and I would figure out what is the one perfect picture out of the 10 of them and be like, okay, that's going to be the thumbnail. Because I won't go on and I won't take endlessly photos until I find the one where I'm like, I have the best body placement, I have the best smile, I have the best this, I have the best, like, if anything, there's so many factors that come into a photo that I'm just like, okay, like I think that this picture will fit well in this thumbnail because it's to go on and um, be the best out of X number of things. And maybe it's not that I'm perfectly smiling, or maybe it's not it's perfectly that, but like it. There's so many factors that come into a photo that I'm just like, you know what? If anything, if I don't like eventually how it looks at some point in the future, I can always adjust. Like there's always going to be at some point where like I can always make things better. So plus also like with all the effort that I'm putting into every one of these thumbnails, like I think that a lot of stuff is just like, man, I am just so at this point being like, hey, good enough. Like I feel like I have put so much effort into uh just a picture on a slapped on a video that uh that regardless of what the video is to actually be about and how it goes, like I'm just like, hey, I put as best effort as I could in for whatever day that is. And there's a lot of times also where like I will be exhausted while doing the video and I'll realize how tired I'll start getting. And so those are decisions that I have to make of like, okay, I'm definitely not going to go on and do this video right now because I'm yawning or I'm just tired, or I'm just wiped out from watching this whole show. So I need to take the time to just decide to carve out in the morning of when I wake up to then do this video so it'll be done. So I'm trying to put my best foot forward through every one of these videos, but like nothing comes out perfect. So because we don't live in a perfect world either, but like I'm to just go on and say that I hope that I can keep getting better at this, whatever that really means, because if anything, there really is no better. There is no like eh, like if anything, um there is no way that I think that I'll ever with this specific channel to get the massive numbers of like a 30 million whatever thing, or like that's just naive. That's like if anything, I just hope to just go on and just be able to get somewhere of just finally getting to a point where I can finally just get monetized with this thing and just finally um be able to finally just say that like out of all this effort I've ever done that there was a point to it. That eventually I'm to find more people and to also have a lot of rapport of people that I've already met. Um, and continue to just keep finding these projects and continue to uh, keep coming up with interesting content every single day. Uh, because eventually I know that it's like there's going to be at some point where I'm going to go on and just be like, okay, like this momentum is going well, but like, how can I keep uh, doing this at the level I'm doing it, as well as also uh, like how am I going to go on and continue to find my closet trying to fit every single person, persona, whatever. Because it's quite interesting. Because if you actually look at a lot of the thumbnails, I'm honestly like reusing a lot of the same clothes over and over again. So, in all honesty, like some people who were to go on and probably not even try to do a process like this, it actually is fairly easy. You only need like a certain assortment of clothing that you can kind of rehash and reuse over and over again. Um, Plus, if you honestly go through a show that has a big enough cast of people, like, yeah, you can find somebody in there and just be that person, regardless of how well known that character is. Whatever, it's that you can be that person, and then ultimately, like, there's a lot of times where, like, in so many of these shows, of the thumbnail, like I am to go on and be different people at certain points in time. So like I'm not just taking one character and just being that the whole time. So yeah. So like it's so fascinating to see how very few people are going on and cosplaying as all these characters throughout their thumbnails and trying to be more unique. Uh but every once in a while, occasionally I'll look at like a Snarky J, or I'll see like a Channel Awesome, or whatever that one reviewer guy is that goes on and he does all the goofy movies and shows and whatever. Some of them really horrible, and he reviews them anyways. Um, Whatever that one guy is that is to go on and be like the bald guy, like I think it's Channel Awesome or something like that. Um, like he at one point had reviewed Zorro, and he was like the only one that actually dressed up like Zorro. So it's kind of appreciative of like, wow, like that's the only guy that really actually does do these cosplay things out of everyone that I've gone on to see. Um, like I don't know why that is such a rare art form. Probably because there's just a certain level of certain people. Like there's every once in a while where I'll go on and I'll see like certain people that are into like gameplay, and they actually do actually dress like the people that they're playing a game as. Like I've seen some women that'll dress up as like the Spider-Man suit, and some people will be playing Overwatch and they'll be dressed as the obvious Overwatch character. Um, yeah, like there is some people that do that, but it seems to be very rarefied air to see people cosplay anymore. Um, I think it's just because it's a thing that people just find it to just be like financially, it's like that's a waste of time. But again, like I do all of that without a dime really spent. Like so much of it is to be pulled from my closet, or also so much of it is to be pulled from Timu, where I don't spend a dime or dollar of getting, and people probably don't understand that. Yeah, like I go through Timu and I would get free items. Like they would go on and have a massive adjustment now where it's going to get a lot harder to get those free items, but like I don't care. Like I'm still trying to go on and find ways to still get free items because feasibly I feel like that's the only thing I have to do at this point. So I'm still grinding away on that to just try to find a way for me to get these items so that way they can lend into thumbnails. Um and hopefully I'll go on and still be able to figure out some ways to hook or crook my way to getting stuff that I've have been needing to get for these thumbnails. Like, there's obviously certain shirts that I'm kind of eyeing that I feel like I need. Like, obviously, uh, I'm trying to get like a Resident Evil hoodie. I'm trying to get a Chucky hoodie. I'm trying to get a shirt that is to do with Ben 10. I'm really trying to get that right now because I feel like Ben 10 was a project that I wish I could have done more of. And I think that Ben 10 could be something that could have been more successful for the channel. Um, but like, I just started doing it and it just went nowhere. Um, but I was thinking like, well, hey, well, maybe if I changed the thumbnails, maybe if I did something different in them, then maybe it would be a thing that would make sense for me to have gone on and done. Because I feel like there's something about that show that just felt like a huge missed opportunity. Uh, then ultimately after that, like, everything has to just do with Power Rangers. Like, me just carving through a good chunk of that series, and also needing to get every shirt that connects to every piece of that, regardless of how minuscule it is. Um, like, I'm trying to find every possible outfit and whatever that connects with the season. And at this point, I may go on and hopefully get through a good chunk of the show with some kind of shirt, costume, something or other, and be completely to the point of like, oh, thank God, like, now I'm to not be as scared. I'm to feel more optimistic about like, okay, I feel that through a good chunk of the show, I at least have some coverage of some kind of costume or some kind of shirt or some kind of something. And I feel that hopefully I will go on in the future be getting at some point more of Power Rangers that will kind of cover more of the the thumbnail of a visual throughout it. Um, so yeah, so I'm gonna get out of here because this is taking too long. I tend to do these really long-winded rants by the end of this, but I think that something specifically like this dialogue will actually be a lot more interesting than stuff that I've done in the past because it's just me working through what I really need right now, and hoping that eventually, uh, me talking about this will hopefully get people to be like, yeah, like, I guess that would be like really smart items to eventually get in the future. Not ever asking for anyone to go on and donate to this channel or to get me these items and then send them to me. Um, because that would go on and just be like, why would anybody care to do that? Uh, but also, like, I want to try to get this via my own way. Like, I want to hope that I can figure out how to get these items and hopefully plan on the future of everything that I can try to get for this channel because I've gone on to have so many just emailing myself of these things that I'm like, okay, I can get this in the future, I can get this in the future, I can get this in the future, and that'll help me um, more so with all of the content that I still need to come up with a better thumbnail for, or better this for, or better that for. And then also some of it is to just go on and just be kind of fun comic book stuff that I can just go on and have. But um, there's also a plethora of different things that are to still help out with a number of thumbnails. Like, I can go on and have like a Witcher shirt, or I can have an Invincible shirt, which is stuff of content that I've done in the past. Uh, there's to go on and be. Eventually, I was so tempted to cover like the Static Shock show, even though probably no one really cares about it. Uh, but I was to go on and come up with like a homemade outfit for that. So maybe at some point I may go on and be tempted to just cover Static Shock because that could just be a fun cartoon. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of content that I have knowledge of, or there's a lot of content where I at some point figured out how to make a cosplay of homemade style, but regardless, it's still there. That eventually I have a picture of that eventually I'm just kind of holding and just like trying to figure out when is the perfect time to do this as a thumbnail piece. And hopefully that day will come. Hopefully that photo won't have been wasted. And hopefully that'll be a fun piece of content that everyone will enjoy, or eventually a lot of people will go on and latch on to, because that'll be fun. Like, I'm hoping that when I actually do go on and I make the effort to get these items, that eventually when I slap them onto thumbnails and whatever, it does help out the video. Because there's sometimes where I go into the extra effort of changing all these things and I'm not really seeing the numbers, and it's like, well, like, at least for my own like state of mind, um, like I left no stone unturned, and I can be just satisfied, if nothing else, that I took that effort to get that thing, to uh, put it on a thumbnail in hopes that that will matter. And it may not, but regardless, um, it shows that I actually care about the product. It shows that I am a fan of it. Like, there is a cool number of things that I wish I could get, like costumes and stuff for, that I just like. Dead Space was actually pretty cool. That I did actually like Dead Space. I would go on to consistently just watch gameplays of it, and uh, like I'd seen the Markiplier gameplay of the remake, and so I did really like Dead Space. But it's just like, okay, I just went on and just did an anime movie of it review, but like there isn't much of Dead Space that is to be, besides a live action movie, not much to really cover. So it's kind of hard to justify um, actually going on and taking the time to get a costume of that, or going on and getting certain costumes for certain things that like didn't go on and do much for the channel, but it's just like, or even doing stuff like Captain Marvel. I'd gotten a costume shirt for Captain Marvel. I'm like, I didn't really care for Captain Marvel, but like, I guess I should go on and figure out how to still have a costume of that, because if nothing else, like I just needed to do that. Uh, like I'm still trying to figure out what could I do as far as the thumbnail representation of certain shows that probably still didn't do well for the channel. Like, I'm still going on and trying to figure out how to finish up stuff like WandaVision, She-Hulks, and stuff like that. If anything, for She-Hulk, I'm just kind of tempted to like, well, hey, I made all these things of the Hulk. Maybe I should just slap that on there, because like, if anything, that'll just kind of get those to be done and whatever, instead of having to make a whole effort of making a whole other thumbnail character and just taking that time up. Uh, there was to be some shows where I feel like I probably should have reviewed that were superhero related, but like when I would start to go into them, I would realize just how much of a wasteful effort that is. So it's just like, okay, like I would see so many people that would be so successful out of so many of these superhero shows, but when I would ever go into them, it would always be a waste of time. Like I'd always think of like, well, hey, like I should probably go into like Teen Titans, right? Or I should go into Young Justice, or I should do these shows that I really liked. But ultimately, I'd always be concerned about like, well, but how well is it? Is it actually going to turn out? Like how um, much of a hesitation should I really have, and how should I just push on into other things and try to move away from the superhero genre and try to just kind of do a coverall. Um, that's why I think I've gone on to anime, because like at this point I can still try to find some kind of superhero things, but like uh, if anything, more so it's to just go on and just try to just find something that is really interesting. Enough that feels quasi like some kind of superhero thing, but not exactly. It's like superhero adjacent for anime. But anyways, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. So thank you for going on watching all this. However, you were going on and dissecting it. really, I just like to just take these long rants by the end of the video because, like, I just realize that no one is going to watch this whole thing, but also, it's always like just deciphering my headspace of where I'm at right now. And there's some stuff where I wanted to kind of keep close to the chest, just because I'm always kind of concerned about whatever I say, and plus also like the more I think that I can open up and say it's like, hey, this is all what I'm doing, like this is my real true love of not only like superhero stuff, comic book things, like, and I really want to obtain all this stuff. Like I really want to go on, like the Casey Jones mask was something that I really did was like, oh my god, I can get this. Oh, like this is so cool. So I went out to finally obtain this thing and I'm like so happy about it. And then when I went on and I slapped it on my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles videos, like it didn't matter. Like it was just like, okay, cool, I have this, but it doesn't really matter. So it's like, okay, well, like I thought it would be like this one cool thing that I could just toss on there, like, yeah, like this is cool, but no one cared. Um, but that's fine. But I thought that that was going to be the only way that I could really be unique for this, but I guess it really doesn't matter. More likely, also, I probably could have gone on and done a better way of cosplaying that, but oh well, I just kind of chucked some things together and made them that mistake. But anyways, so uh, here's hoping to make better decisions. Here's hoping to make shorter videos at some point. But I'm gonna get that out of here. Bye, bye. Bye, bye. Oh, also, I wanted to get a Cordaval mask and I wanted to get a Deathstroke mask. Uh, those were things that I've kind of always wanted to get for the longest amount of time. They had some comic books where they had these certain masks on them, and I thought that was like a really cool idea. Uh, but then the longer and longer I waited to get these things, like the more expensive they were probably getting. So it's like, ah, okay, well, I'll just go on and I'll figure out a way to just separately get the masks. And I found out on Timu, like you can get these items. I don't care if Timu is to what they, however they were to go on about this. I don't care if everything ends up getting uh to be a thing that was to be kind of 3D printed or is to be uh a thing that they're selling this from some third world country, whatever. Like, I don't care what it is. Like, I'm just happy that I'm getting these items. I don't care how Timu gets it. I don't know how. I don't care how um, Timu is to have their process. I don't care. Like, I'm using this thing in order to get these items, and that's it. Like, I'm not to go on and really think of anything more than that. It's a free avenue to get these items, so that's all that I care about. So with that said, I hope to go on and somehow obtain more items, but if anything, I'm just kind of at this kind of gap of like just waiting um to obtain certain things. I'm finally getting a new, hopefully soon, a new microphone because yeah, this thing broke like a long time ago, and now I just had to like just tie it together with this green thing that you see here. Like it's just tied to the, and like man, I hope I can get a new mic at some point because this is just ridiculous. Um, so I'm hoping to get a new mic, and hopefully that works. I'm hoping to get more shirts and more things coming. Uh, Hopefully I'll go on and be able to finally get to a point where my face is completely healed and it doesn't look as beat up as it is, so I can justify doing more photos, doing more pictures. Because there's quite a bit of hesitation of like, well, like if anything, like I really want to go on and I really want to cover more of these past characters because I figured out how to do outfits, but I'm just kind of hesitant because it's like my face is just kind of just beat up, just all over, just like so, just beat up. So I'm like, because there's sometimes where I'm just so wearing myself down that eventually it goes up on my face, and it's just like, oh well. So yeah, so That is to be way too much in detail about myself, my person, and what I plan for the future. So I'm gonna get the heck out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.